All right, let's correct sentence 3 and 4 together today. Sentence 3 says, basketball all-star Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points in one game on March 2nd, 1962. In the same year, he scores 4,029 points, a record far from being matched. In this sentence, we have verb tense errors again. We're also going to add 2 commas. We have an abbreviation error to address. And we also have a comma splice. Remember, that's a comma acting as a period, so we'll change that. First, let's start with our verb tense errors. Our sentence has given us a clue as to when this sentence takes place. It takes place in 1962, so we know that we're talking about something that happens in the past. However, we are using the verb scores, which is present tense. So I am going to take out that word scores, and I'm going to replace it with the past tense scored. That takes care of my verb tense errors. Next, I'm going to add 2 commas. The first comma I'm going to add is going to be after the 2 to separate my day from the year. And lastly, my second comma is going to be added in between the 4 and the 0 in this number. That takes care of my comma errors. Next, I'm going to address an abbreviation error. So if we take a look at our sentence one more time, I can only see one abbreviation error. Now, if this was in an informal writing like a text or something, we could use this abbreviation the way that it is. However, in our formal writing, we want to try to avoid using abbreviations if we can. So I'm going to erase PTS, and I'm going to replace it with the more formal points. That takes care of my abbreviation error. And lastly, I have a comma splice. Remember, a comma splice is a comma that's acting as a period, but we know that we can't use a comma to combine 2 complete sentences. So I have a complete sentence here, followed by another complete sentence here. This allows me to see that I have a comma splice right after 1962. Again, this comma isn't strong enough to combine these 2 complete sentences, so I have to replace it with punctuation that is. I have 2 options here. I can replace that comma with a period and capitalize the I in in, or I can use a semicolon. A semicolon is going to be a little bit easier for me to use, and so that's what I'll use. I'm going to get rid of that comma then, and I'll replace it with a semicolon. And that fixes my comma splice error. Now let's take a look at sentence 4 together. The sentence says, "Cars?" my mother exclaimed when our car dies its 3rd death in a month. "As your dad says, you can't live with them and you can't live without them." In this sentence, we have verb tense errors again. We're also going to add quotation marks because someone is speaking. We have some capitalization errors to address. We'll add some commas, and we need to fix our end punctuation. Let's start with our verb tense errors. This sentence is talking about something that's already happened. So I am going to replace this present tense dies with the past tense died. That would take care of my verb tense errors. Next, I'm going to add quotation marks. So at the beginning of the sentence, my mother is exclaiming the word cars, so I need to show that she's speaking by adding those quotation marks around the word cars. Now, there's also something kind of strange happening in this sentence as well. We have someone speaking, but then as she's speaking, she's using a quote. So what we see here is a quote within a quote. So to mark that we have a quote within a quote, we are going to use the single quotation marks at the beginning of her quotation used. So I have a single quotation mark at you and also another single quotation mark after the word them. Now this looks kind of weird because we have 3 quotation marks there, but again, it's important that we show that we have a quote within a quote. Adding those quotation marks takes care of that. Next, we have a capitalization error to address. The capitalization error begins at mother. In some situations, the word mother would be capitalized, but it's not always capitalized. There is a test that you can use to determine if you should capitalize mother or not. The test is this. If you can replace that word mother with your mom's name, and it makes sense, you should capitalize it. If it doesn't make sense, then you don't have to capitalize it. I'm going to run that test with my mom's name. Cars, my Gina explained. It doesn't really make sense for me to say my Gina. Because it doesn't make sense, I know I don't have to capitalize mother. All of my other words have been capitalized correctly, so that takes care of my one capitalization error. Next, I have one comma to add. Now this comma is going to be added right before my fanboy and. Keep in mind that when you see those fanboys, you have to check to see if you have a complete sentence before the fanboy and a complete sentence after the fanboy. Because I do have a complete sentence before and after and, I do need a comma between them and the word and. That fixes my comma error. And lastly, I have one end punctuation error to fix as well. If I'm checking my sentences, I have a sentence here that has a correct end punctuation, as well as I have a correct punctuation here. However, at the beginning of the sentence, my mother is exclaiming a one-word statement. Because she's exclaiming, I'm going to add an exclamation mark right after the word cars. Adding my exclamation point there fixes my end punctuation, and I have corrected sentence 4. If you have any questions, make sure that you comment on the video, and I'll answer those questions as soon as I can. Thanks, everyone.